She made up lies, set traps, and tried to make me look like the villain. I never imagined I'd experience something like this. You know when you think you know someone? 2 years together, daily interactions, plans for the future, trips, introductions to the family, and suddenly everything falls apart for a reason that, at first I thought was just strange, but then I realized was just the tip of the iceberg. It all really started that day of the funeral. She asked me to go consolate her ex-boyfriend. Yes, that's right, her ex, who had just lost his mother-in-law. I was in shock. I tried to remain calm, asked why, and she said it was empathy, that they had a history, that he was lonely. But then my stomach turned. I said I didn't think it was appropriate, that it was strange, that if it were the other way around, she would be bothered too. She freaked out, called me controlling, cold, insensitive, and the next day, she broke up with me, out of the blue, said she needed to re-evaluate her life. I was devastated, but tried to respect it. But what I didn't know was that the funeral was the beginning of a dirty plan. Weeks later, I discovered she was frequenting her ex's house, getting close to his family, especially his father, Ottavio, a millionaire businessman. She wasted no time. Apparently, she started insinuating herself, helping with chores, showing herself helpful. In short, that soap opera kind of thing. But real life takes its toll. A mutual friend sent me screenshots of her stories at a party with his family. She didn't post them on her profile, of course. Everything was hidden. And then I began to understand she never just wanted to comfort anyone. She had a plan, and I was just an obstacle. What hurt the most was realizing that perhaps our relationship had been used for months to create an image. She said my family was simple, that I had no ambition. Now I understand what she meant. I was the means, not the end. And when a bigger target appeared, she didn't think twice. But what she didn't count on was that Ottavio was smart. Time passed, and to everyone's surprise, Ottavio cut his own son out of the inheritance. Apparently, he discovered something about Natalia and decided to put an end to that forced connection. When I found out, I won't lie, I felt a certain relief. I thought she was going to disappear from my life for good. No way. That's when my true hell began. She came back with a vengeance, as if nothing had happened. She tried to arrange meetings, sending messages as if we were still together. When I ignored her, the indirect messages on social media came flooding in, the texts saying I'd abandoned her, that I'd been ungrateful, that she'd given up everything for me. It was surreal. Then came the accidental encounters. I'd leave work, and she'd be at the same bar. I'd go for a run in the park, and there she was. And the worst part was when she'd approach my friends and start planting lies, playing the victim. She said I was unstable, that I forbade her from seeing people, that I had violent jealousy attacks. Even my mother came to ask me if I'd really done all that. I was losing my peace, my image, and even my health. I started having insomnia, anxiety, and out-of-the-blue rages. I felt trapped, and for a while I started to think I was the one in the wrong. The turning point was a Sunday. I remember it like it was yesterday. I'd gone out to lunch with my cousin, and when I got home, there was a gift box on my apartment doorstep. There was no return address. Inside was a t-shirt of mine she'd saved, a printed photo of us, and a handwritten letter saying that if I didn't come back soon, something bad would happen. My whole body froze. You know that feeling you're being watched, that everything is out of your control? I sat on the floor, box in hand, and cried. I cried like a child. It was fear, anger, helplessness, all rolled into one. That's when I decided I had to react. The next day, I went to the police station. I never thought I'd be that kind of man, you know, that I'd need a restraining order. But I went. I brought screenshots, the letter, and told her everything. I was interviewed, and the officer was very direct. You did the right thing. This is stalking. Don't wait for it to get worse. And hearing that gave me a mixture of shame and relief, because for months I'd felt weak, dramatic, and exaggerated. But it wasn't drama. It was real. and it was destroying me. I started the process, found a lawyer, and distanced myself from everything and everyone who had any connection to her. I wanted my life back. I wanted to breathe. And the hardest part was dealing with the guilt, because even with everything, part of me still remembered the good times. It still hurt to delete photos, cancel plans, tell my family that this wasn't just a breakup. It was a serious case of stalking. But in that moment, for the first time in months, I slept through the night. Without waking up scared, without checking my phone in shock, I slept knowing I was doing something for myself. I slept knowing she wouldn't cross the line without consequences. And that was the first step in rebuilding my peace. Of course, the court process wasn't easy. She tried to turn everything around. She said I was trying to tarnish her image because she moved on, that I was obsessed, that she was an innocent woman just trying to live. I watched each lie told so coldly that for a second, I thought she would convince everyone. But I had evidence, messages, records, testimonies. I had to expose everything, photos, recordings, even intimate situations. It was humiliating but necessary. At each hearing, I left exhausted, as if I'd run a marathon. But I went, because I knew my life was at stake. And even with all this going on, life didn't stop. I had to work, pretend I was fine, maintain my routine. But inside, I was broken. I had panic attacks at the office. One day, I simply sat in the bathroom at work and cried silently for almost half an hour. It wasn't just the fear of her. It was the feeling that no one understood, that everyone thought men don't suffer this, that if they're going through this, it's because they let them. As if I'd asked to be stalked, manipulated, exposed. The loneliness of this kind of trauma is something no one prepares you for. My closest friends were crucial. One of them, especially Felipe. He was the only one who never doubted me. He listened to me without trying to solve anything. He just listened. And when I wanted to give up the case, he was the one who reminded me that it wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom, about setting a boundary I'd never known before. He told me, "You don't deserve to live in fear. You have the right to exist in peace." And that made an impression on me. I started seeking therapy, even though I had trouble trusting anyone again. But little by little, I came back to myself. The sentence came down months later, and when the judge read that she would have to maintain a minimum distance, that she was forbidden from looking for me, from coming near my house, my work, I couldn't hold it back. I cried in front of everyone. It wasn't joy, it was relief. It was as if I'd been carrying 500 kilos on my back and suddenly I could stand again. It was then that I realized how much that relationship had hurt me, not just because of what she did afterward, but because of everything I'd silently accepted while we were still together. She was already abusive and manipulative before. I just didn't want to see it. Over time, I've been rebuilding my life. I deleted all my photos, changed my number, and left social media for a long time. I started hanging out with real friends more, started running again, and reconnected with my family, especially my younger brother, who said, "I finally looked alive again." I still have difficult days. Sometimes, out of nowhere, my body reacts as if I'm being followed. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night scared. But today I know how to recognize these signs. And most importantly today, I know I'm not weak for having experienced this. I'm strong for having left, strong for not letting shame swallow me, strong for having faced what no one sees, the emotional abuse, the silence, the subtle manipulation, the blackmail disguised as affection. Today I talk about this with other men. I've received messages from strangers saying they've experienced something similar but never told anyone for fear of ridicule. And that's why I share this here. Because the pain exists, the trauma exists. But there's also a way out. There's light after the darkness, as cliché as it sounds. I'm not the same Kaio I used to be, and that's okay. Because today's Kaio is more aware, more determined, more attentive to the signs. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't change what happened. Because despite the hell, it forced me to grow. It forced me to choose myself. Today, I don't accept crumbs, nor manipulation disguised as love. Today, I don't allow anyone to make me doubt my own perception. Because I know what I lived through. And no one will make me forget it. Sometimes I still find myself remembering that day of the funeral. It seems like that was when everything started to fall apart. But today, I see that it was there that the truth began to emerge. Natalia didn't suddenly change. She just stopped hiding, and I stopped making excuses for what I'd been feeling for a long time. That constant feeling of walking on eggshells, of having to mince words, of thinking everything was my fault. That wasn't love, it was control. And true love doesn't make us feel smaller or lost within ourselves. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it. I'm still in the process. There are days when I wake up with my heart racing for no reason. There are places I avoid, people I've cut off forever. Not because I hold a grudge, but because I need peace. And there are people who never understood what I went through. People who still think Natalia was just too emotional. But I don't need to convince anyone anymore. I know what I felt. I know the fear I experienced. And today, my focus is on taking care of my mental health, my space, and my life without drama, without games, without people who drain my energy. Trusting someone again after all this was a huge challenge. For a long time, any gesture of affection made me suspicious. Any compliment seemed like a strategy. But little by little, I've been rebuilding that trust. First in myself. The first person we need to trust is ourselves. Learning to say no, to set boundaries, to recognize the signs. Unfortunately, no one teaches that. But life, when it pushes us to the bottom, also gives us the chance to relearn everything. And today, I'm no longer a man who accepts anything for fear of being alone. If you're reading this and identified with any part of it, I want to tell you, one thing, you're not crazy, you're not exaggerating. What you feel is real. And you have the right to protect yourself, to set boundaries, to disappear if necessary. Even if no one understands, even if they call you ungrateful, cold, cruel, you don't owe your peace to anyone. And those who truly love you will never make you choose between your sanity and their presence in your life. This was one of the greatest truths I learned in this process. Freedom didn't come overnight, nor was it easy. But it did come. It came in the form of silence, of peace, of being able to walk down the street without looking back, of being able to post a photo without fear of reprisal. Today I live a simple life without much ostentation, but it's mine, it's clean, it's light. And that, after what I've been through, is worth more than any relationship, status, or appearance. It's worth my peace of mind, it's worth my sound sleep, it's worth my mental health. And no, I'm not a poor soul. I'm not an eternal victim. I'm someone who survived something that many people still ignore or don't take seriously, and that doesn't define me, but it's part of my story. A part that, despite being painful, made me stronger, more clear-headed, and more determined. And now, I'm not ashamed to talk about it, because if this story can help just one person, it's already been worth it. It already makes sense. It already transforms pain into strength and fear into awareness. I ended that cycle in the worst way, but I began another with much more truth. Today, any sign of manipulation sets off an alarm bell. Any attempt at control pushes me away immediately. And that's maturity. It's protection. It's self-care. It took me time to understand that distancing myself from someone who hurts me isn't weakness, it's self-love. And today, my commitment is to myself, to my peace, to the life I still have ahead of me, without ties, without fear, without Natalia. Today, I move on, with scars, yes, but whole, and every Step I take away from all that is a silent but gigantic victory. I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore, because now I know who I am, and there's no manipulation in the world that will make me forget that again.